another episode of Speak, Lead, and Grow, the District 57 podcast series. I'm joined here tonight with Lee Vaughn. We are running this series with different guests that may have value to all the Toastmasters in our district. Tonight, we have invited Dennis Dawson. He's someone who most of you have exposure with when you attend an event like a TLI or a DECA meeting. Dennis is usually there. He is known for telling excellent and compelling stories whenever he delivers a speech. He integrates storytelling, both verbally and visually, into his speeches. So we invited him here tonight to tell us about his theory of storytelling and the tips and guidance that he has for the rest of you.
So I joined Toastmasters 18 years ago. I was working at a place called Documentum. Now, I'd been out of work for a year before I got there. So once I got a job again, I was really heads down in my cubicle. I didn't want anybody to perceive me as not working hard. But really close to my cubicle, there was this conference room. And once a week, there would be this group of like 20 people in there. And every so often, they would break out into applause. And then there was laughter coming from the room all the time. I thought, I don't know what that project is, but I want to get on that project. Well, I was in the break room not too long after, and I saw a sign. It said, free pizza. Now, I'm not going to turn down my favorite food, free. So I went to the open house of the Toastmasters Club, and there were 6 different kinds of pizza. That was nice. But a very entertaining fellow got up, and he told a story of how Toastmasters had helped him. Now, personally, I've never had a fear of public speaking. I was the first one up for show and tell when I was a kid. But when they invited me up to do a table topic, I started speaking and then I choked up. And what I realized is that I had been stuck in my cubicle for almost a year. I didn't know anybody outside of my immediate work group. I didn't know anything about the company. And Toastmasters is what brought me out of that shell, brought me back into working with people in a corporate situation. And without Toastmasters, I think I'd still be huddled in that cubicle, afraid that I was going to lose my job.
Wow. So you would say definitely transformative.
Oh, absolutely. For the social opportunity, but also for the speaking opportunities that I got by joining Toastmasters.
So, Dennis, tonight we are here to focus on your specialty of storytelling. You're a storytelling guy, and rumor has it that you're quite good at it. I attended a DECM sometime last year, I think it was, and you gave a presentation on storytelling, and I have to tell you that I was quite impressed. And with that, I'd like to know, how would you describe your theory of storytelling?
Well, the most important thing for me when I'm telling a story is to have a very clear picture of the action in my mind, kind of like a film storyboard. So I tell the story describing the details that are most interesting to me. They're probably going to be interesting to others too. I don't really care. I speed through the boring parts and I slow down for the denouement to make sure that it really stands out. I was helping a friend edit one of her stories, and she'd written this fun story about elves that live on the periphery of the human world. And as a result, everything in her story happened off stage, kind of like Greek tragedy. Oh, there's a war over there. It's horrible. Thousands died, but they only talk about it. You never see it. And her story was exactly the same way. So I helped her change it around so the point of view was that of the elf right in the middle of the story, clinging for dear life to a fire engine as it sped out on a call. So shifting the point of view that way, place the reader at the center of the events, which is where they want to be. So using your mind's eye cinematically and really picturing it, really believing it, it means you can zoom in on the most interesting aspects of the story and take the listeners with you. When you are looking out to sea and you see something, if you haven't pictured it in your mind, your eyes just sort of go blank. Your expression goes flat. But if you're actually seeing the ship in your mind and you're seeing it out there, then your eyes are going to focus and your tilt of your head is going to be exactly right so that other people can see it along with you.
Okay.
I like that.
So, were there any particular experiences during your life, in any point in your life when you were younger, that led you to become good at storytelling? Any kind of formative experience that convinced you to go in that direction?
Oh, yeah. I used to make up songs and stories as far back as I can remember. In second grade, I wrote a story called The Boy and the Somebody. I believe the entire story was about 5 sentences, and it ended with an explosion, as all good stories do. But it made it into the school literary journal. Okay, it was a stack of purple ditto pages. Yeah, but I was proud of that. A little encouragement at the right time can really have a big impact.
Interesting. How would you say that storytelling has helped you outside of Toastmasters, be it in your personal or professional life?
Well, in college, I was nicknamed Captain Analogy because I was always explaining things through metaphors and similes. Some of them worked out better than others. One year, uh, when I was in student government, the president hired a secretary during Christmas break. So he had hired her without having her interview any of the other members of the Senate or without considering any other candidates. And I stood up in the council meeting and I said, you don't just hire anybody. You don't walk into the store and pick up the first thing that says soap. You don't know if you're going to get shampoo or Comet cleanser. And I heard a muffled shriek at the back of the room, and someone bolted for the door. I didn't realize that she was actually in the room when I made my little speech. So I've always been able to find an apt, if not necessarily flattering, analogy to bring home a point. I still do that. In fact, I just did. I just told a story that brought home the point that I'm not very good at telling stories. But if you live long enough, and I've lived a long time, I have, you accumulate examples you can share with others who are going through a tough time or facing a tough problem. If you tell a relatable story from your own experience, it shows them that you understand what they're going through, and it reassures them that they'll find a path to victory somewhere in the end.
Mhm. We see all kinds of businesses and organizations saying that they value storytelling in their employees. What advice would you give to someone who has never approached that subject before? What's the starting point? Where should they um, start in terms of their learning process?
It's similar to the advice I would give somebody. People are always telling me that they want to be funny. How can I
Mhm.
tell a joke? Well, I started telling jokes when I was 4 or 5 years old. And of course, they're terrible when you're a little kid. But the adults pat you on the head and they groan and they tell you, oh, that was so funny. And that will encourage you. And you can get away with it at that age. But as you get older and you become an adult, you don't want to tell stories that fall flat. You don't want to make jokes that don't make people laugh. So it's much more difficult to start when you're an adult. But if you want to be a great joke teller, you have to tell jokes. That's what you have to do. And you have to bear with the scorn of your fellow adults and the people who are not going to be impressed with you until you
Mhm.
find that rhythm and you figure out how to do it right. Well, storytelling works very much the same way. It's easier for me to tell stories now because I told stories when I was a kid. If you're trying to start as an adult, there are two aspects to it. There's having stories to tell and then being able to tell the stories well. So I would actually start with the delivery of stories and memorize and retell classics, Aesop, Grimm, or Hans Christian Andersen. Uh, I still have to work to tell The Little Match Girl properly because I get so wrapped up in the story, I actually choke up when we get to the part where she ascends into heaven. And I started to choke up a little bit there because I was imagining it. But
Mhm.
when you tell these stories, they give you a chance to practice the cadence of delivering a story so that you know when to speed up, when to slow down, when to quiet down, when to bring the power to your voice to make everything fall together. Now, after you're good at telling stories, I strongly recommend the book Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. He's a big shot in the Moth uh, storytelling club. He's got several tips and tools that will help you find interesting stories from your own experience and prepare to perform them.
Let's say that someone was giving a purely technical or informed speech. Can storytelling still play a role there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stories are a great way, especially to make technical concepts more accessible. I just read a book called Learning How to Learn, which at my age, I'm still learning how to learn. It makes a comparison where if you're trying to put a fact into your memory, it's like trying to shove it into a toothpaste tube. It's really hard to put toothpaste back in the tube. But if you're imagining a picture, that's like sticking a picture up on your wall in front of you. It's a boom, boom. And this is just the way our brains work. We are designed to use our visuospatial uh, memory to very easily capture pictures and keep them. So, a good metaphor, a good illustrative story, particularly if it's a little bit silly, if it's not too serious,
Mhm.
it gives you something that's going to catch you unexpected. That metaphor is more likely to stick in your mind. So, absolutely, a good descriptive story is going to help your audience retain what you say. And retention is really the key when you're giving a technical presentation or you're trying to convince people of others. It's not how much information you give them, but how much they take with them when they leave.
Okay. We're in the middle of contest season right now, and I'm wondering if you think storytelling is absolutely essential, or are there people who can actually succeed without storytelling?
Well, in a way, that's a softball question. I can't think of a single world championship public speaker who didn't include a personal story in their speech. So, one nifty thing about interesting stories is that they can use up a good bit of that 5 to 7 minutes in a Toastmasters speech. The audience is only going to like you better if you're telling a story, and it makes it easier to get all the way to your time limit.
And with that, I do have another question. Where within a speech should stories be placed if one needed to relegate it to one place or another?
Well, that's an interesting question. You can tell a story right off the bat as your introduction. And ideally, if you do that, then you're going to come back to it in your conclusion. So many times I saw a presentation where a man was talking about his wife had been in a serious accident. He went on to talk about what happened neurologically and the products that he had actually worked on to help her recover. But then at the end of the presentation, he came back to his wife and talked about how successfully she had recovered at that point. And that kind of puts people on the edge of their seats, because that's what we want to know. Is his wife all right? And we listen to everything else, but that sews it up perfectly. Now, another way to use stories is to have your three main points and illustrate each of the 3 points by telling a short story that goes along with it. Or you can start your speech with a story and then refer back to that story in each of the transitions between your main points, and then finish up with the conclusion. So
Okay.
the one thing you don't want to do is let the story take over your speech to the extent that you don't really bring home the point that you were trying to make. So you have to choose the story carefully and not let it overwhelm.
So it sounds like there are, you could just stick with one story, or like you were describing earlier, you could actually bring in 2 or 3 stories to flesh out a certain example that you're talking about. I want to talk about, as you were perfecting your craft, were there any people that inspired you? Any people that we might know, any famous people or not so famous people that you um, looked to and that you could point to for us to follow because they were such good storytellers?
That's interesting. Back in the day, in black and white television, there was Captain Kangaroo, and he would read stories every morning to us. He was really good at reading the picture book, really good at showing the picture and pausing and doing the voices of the characters. So I think that had a very early influence on me. Later in life, Garrison Keillor, of course, on Prairie Home Companion, and then Tom Bodett is also a great storyteller. And what's great about their stories for Toastmasters is that, of course, they were on the radio. So they didn't even have gestures to uh, provide that extra element. It was all with their voice, and they did a magnificent job. One of my personal favorite storytellers is Justin Wilson. He was the Cajun chef, and he would usually break in the middle of whatever he was cooking and tell at least a short story. But the funniest story I ever heard, and it's mostly, of course, the way he tells it, is Alligator Shoes story. So you can look on YouTube, Justin Wilson, Alligator Shoes, and you will hear an excellent example of storytelling. Now, my grandfather was a wonderful storyteller, but his stories were from a different generation. So I'm happy to say that most of his stories are buried with him, but he told them well.
Speaking of YouTube, you have some substantial content on YouTube, and some of which I believe is devoted to technical tools you use to illustrate your stories. I've heard the app name Doodly. I wonder if you can talk about how you use tech in your stories and when it's appropriate to use it.
I like to draw. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily great at it, but I do volunteer at the local elementary school, and I'll go in and do a drawing lesson with the fourth graders every day. And when I do it, I go up to the whiteboard and I keep trying to emphasize to the kids that draw as big a picture as you possibly can, fill up each page. It's much easier to draw big than to draw tiny little pictures and try and fit in all the details. Taking my own advice, I usually work on a large whiteboard when I'm creating the little illustrations that end up on my slides in my speeches, because it's so much easier to draw big, get the details in, as I said, but also I can make a mark and erase it, make a mark and erase it, make a mark and erase it, and I'm not going to tear up the paper working on a whiteboard. So I'll always start with a whiteboard or an 8.5 by 11 page in the Rocket book. That's one where I can draw with ink, but it's water soluble ink and I can erase it off of the plastic pages. Anything that allows me to make a mistake and fix it quickly. Take a scan of that with my phone. They used to use phones for making telephone calls. I don't know if you remember that, but mostly I use my phone for taking pictures, sending them over to my laptop computer. There I'm going to use GIMP, the generic image manipulation program, and colorize it, clean up any other mistakes that I've made, and then I can put them directly into the slides. Now, Doodly is this cool utility where you can take a picture that you've drawn and then go over it and create the path that the virtual pen should follow. And then you play it back and it puts a fake hand up there that draws the image for you. And it's interesting to see. It's better than just having this static picture, and it makes me look like I'm really cool. So Doodly is great. There's also a product called Toonly that comes with it that lets you make little cartoons that you can drop into your presentations. But I do like the rough looking graphics that I'm able to create with the whiteboard and Doodly. It's a lot of fun.
Now, for those of you viewing this who are not familiar, Dennis's YouTube channel, check out some of his videos because he incorporates some of these tools. You know, one thing I've noticed is that some people have started using AI to actually either generate a story or at least to structure it and flesh it out. What do you think about that trend? Is it good or bad, or and can you see yourself personally using it?
Well, it's funny. People want to be judgmental about AI. Whether is it good, is it bad? The fact is, it's here, so we may as well coexist with it, if nothing else. It's a fun tool. It's great for generating ideas. I really like playing with Dolly. I guess it's Dolly 3 now, which is the you give it a phrase and it creates a picture for you. And I've used that on the job where I'll say, give me a picture of 16 product managers in the style of Dr. Seuss.
Mhm.
And it does a really great job of putting that together. I don't use that picture directly. What I do is use it as a reference that I can use to draw my own picture to go along with it. I haven't really used AI for stories. And the reason for that, frankly, I'm a professional writer. Anybody who could be replaced with AI right now, they need a better job because they're not good at it. AI is only able to create stories based on ideas that other people have already had. Now, it might put them together in a interesting way that you hadn't seen before, but it's sort of like I Love Lucy, I think. I Love Lucy did all of the sitcom plots you can possibly have 70 years ago. And since that time, pretty much all the sitcoms you see are still copying those same tropes and those same stories, which is great. It's still really entertaining. But very few situation comedies are really forward looking. So shows like Severance that actually take you into a whole new way of seeing the world. I don't believe that AI would be able to come up with something like that. So as far as a genuinely new story with interesting insights, AI is not there, certainly not yet. And I hope it never gets there because then we'll just be consumers of stories and not creators.
Exactly. And to one of your points earlier, a personal story is something that AI will never be able to replicate. AI does not know you personally, or at least not yet. So, as you mentioned, personal stories are what really gravitate the audience towards you. So that's something that has always been a good idea.
That's a good point.
This has been great. This will help our viewers on their journey of improving their skills and becoming a better storyteller, both personally and professionally. Lee, any additional thoughts or questions that we have?
I really enjoyed the insights. There's a lot that I'm going to take. I would encourage everybody to check out Dennis's YouTube channel. I'm sure there's a treasure trove there of great insights. I want to thank Dennis for his time and what he's offered us. Thank you so much.
Well, certainly.
Right.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Definitely. And again, everyone, this has been another episode of Speak, Lead, and Grow. Stay tuned as we invite other people of the district to share their insights on personal and professional growth. With that, we're signing off. Have a good night.